So thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about some of our work in the field of Mediterranean diet and cancer. I have chosen this topic because of the time of the day, right? It's lunch, so maybe the message will go through easier than in the evening. It's important for me that you understand I have a low tone of my voice, an incredible Italian accent. These two issues may jeopardize everything I say. So please, if you do not understand, just tell me, oh, look, I didn't understand. It's important. It's important to me that scientific research in humans is understood, because we are part of the same community. You do your work, I do my work. These two words should be really able to talk to each other. Our research may help human beings to live healthier and happier. And everybody here wants to be happy, right? So this is important. You understand me. And if you understand me, and if you wish me to give more information about research conducted by our groups or other groups, I will be very happy to talk about this in different other opportunities. So, before talking about Mediterranean diet, I need to frame where the studies of Mediterranean diet has been conducted here at McMaster in Canada, right? And I want to tell you, as on the same line that, actually, I have that Dr. Valeri was indicating, we are working in a program called Cancer Prevention at McMaster. We want to erase this disease from populations. We have knowledge and technology to do that. Therapy is very important for patients, but we want to make sure that people will live their life without contact with the disease. So we have cancer prevention. That is an action to prevent the development of the disease, right? Either through healthy lifestyle and through the cancel or reduction of exposure, which is dangerous for individuals because this exposure can lead to cancer. At the same time, we can do also a little bit more than physical activity, diet. We may use natural or synthetic agents able to prevent a disease. And this is what we do, right? So we do both sides. Prevention through healthy lifestyle, and try to find substances able to reduce the risk of cancer development. These two pathways. If you look at, this is like a natural history of cancer. We know that cancer is based on the transformation of cells from normal pre-neoplastic to tumor cells, transform cells. What do these cells are doing? They are able to multiply themselves without any reason, any specific aims. They just multiply themselves in the tissues. At the beginning, they stay in a very small lesions. Later on, they are able to invade the blood vessels, lymphatic network, and spread all over the body. In other words, if the tumors will stay in this condition, nobody would care. But tumors can kill people when they spread, right? And when you look at the patient's symptoms, you see that when the lesion is very, very, very small, patients do not have symptoms, but the symptoms appear very strong when the disease is already advanced. That's why it's important for us to detect the disease before, when people has no symptoms of its presence. And so we need to look at biomarker indices of the disease. And the need of these biomarkers is important in this area, right? When you don't have any symptoms, but if we have a protein, a sign, some kind of signals that you can find blood, when you don't have the disease, you just having a kind of susceptibility to develop cancer, then is a moment in which we can act. So at McMaster, we are developing a first step of research looking for biomarkers of initial stage. We want to catch even the small alteration in cells, even before the first cells has been developed. And the second thing we want to do is, to find the anti-cancer intervention. For any transformation should be a substance, an activity, something that we can introduce in the daily life of people in order to stop the cancer, right? And so, biomarkers. So we are looking for signals of the disease before the disease is onset. And it could be the DNA, this genetic material, chromosomes. After so many decades, we have now understood that cancer is a genetic disease, not because of familiarity. There are families in which genetics is very important, but these families are approximately in the 5% of the whole population. Cancer is genetic because it comes from genes, from the genes of the cells, right? And it could be mutation. They could be very dangerous mutations that alterate the production of proteins and then metabolic activity to produce cancer. But these mutations are very uncommon because DNA, and we are lucky for that, is very stable. What may happen is that it's not the DNA which is mutated at the beginning. Then when the cancer is developed, then there are a lot of mutations. But at the beginning, in the phase, as I mentioned here, right? Here, there is not much mutation. But what we have is that the way in which the expression of genes is altered. In other words, there are genes who are able to increase cell proliferation. There are genes that are doing their work, right? When we have a scare here on the skin, we injure our skin. After a few days, we see that the skin is perfectly done because there are genes who are producing the proliferation of cells under the stimulus of the lesion. But these genes, sometimes, they are overexpressed. They are normal, they are overexpressed. This passage here is alterated. Genes are printing macro RNAs to produce protein to induce proliferation. So if you have a out of control proliferation, it's just maybe because these genes are overexpressed. And these microRNAs print a lot of proteins to produce proliferation. There are other genes who are doing tumor suppressor activity. They suppress cell proliferation. So if the DNA is able to emphasize, to increase the expression of these genes, tumor is suppressed. So when we look at the different steps, now these are DNA, printing microRNAs produce proteins, which produce different metabolic activity, and then cancer cells. We thought that one way to study the biomarkers and to try to find biomarkers is RNA. RNA is the printing copy of what DNA has to say in terms of protein synthesis. And it's not only macro RNA, but also micro RNA, macro and micro. We are now looking in particular at the micro, small molecules of RNAs. What these molecules are doing is very interesting. You know, for the longest time, people say, this DNA is too big, it's too much to print all the proteins used to the human beings. There are parts of DNA which are not useful at all. In reality, now we understand that these parts of DNA are able to produce some small part of microRNAs. And the microRNAs, where they are synthesized by the DNA, are able to produce degradation of microRNAs, degradation of those parts of RNA which is produced, is printed with copies of DNA. In other words, if, for instance, genes tends to produce a lot of inputs to induce proliferation, right? And tumor suppressor, enhancing. These microRNAs are able to reduce the expression of these macroRNAs, leading to cancer protection. Is it fine? Is it clear? So these microRNAs, a small molecule, are able to shut down the copies of macroRNA, able to push the development of cancer. On the other hand, there are other microRNAs that can put down the expression of tumor suppressor activity, so helping the development of cancer. So microRNAs could be from one side positive, from the other side negative, but they could represent biomarkers of the initial phase of cancer. This is very important to us because we can study exactly the potential development of disease before it comes. So what we did, this is a part of the study I did when I was in Italy. It has been now completed in Hamilton. In order to identify these biomarkers before the onset of disease, we had to take these biomarkers in healthy individuals, right? So, between 1987 and 1992, we recruit healthy women. Almost 11,000, 6 of them were in premenopausal status, it means younger than 45 years of age, and the rest was 5,000, slightly older, from 45 to 74. They were completely healthy. Then we took, when we contacted them, we asked them if they want to participate in the study. We took blood from them and put in the freezers. After 20 years, some of these women got breast cancer. In particular, for instance, 300 of postmenopausal women got breast cancer. When these women had breast cancer, we went back to our freezers and we took the vials that we collected when they were still healthy 20 years before. And then we took a sample of control, so women who during the same 20 years of waiting time didn't get the disease. So they were healthy and they remain healthy. And then we wanted to see if there were some kind of difference in macroRNAs, in the small macroRNAs in their blood. Because if there were differences, this difference may have led to us the understanding that we had in our hand biomarkers of breast cancer many years before the onset of the disease. So this is what we did. We took the vials out of the refrigerator. These are the vials. We did the RNA extraction. We characterized the microRNAs. We had the bioinformatic analysis. And this is the microRNAs profiling. These are very interesting new technology, right? And we have more than 2,000 microRNAs for each individual. And for each line, the like blue, we can say that in this case, the microRNAs were downregulated, and where there is the red one, microRNAs were upregulated. With a downregulation, upregulation of microRNAs, we could understand which were the genes who were controlled. Again, many, many years before the onset of the disease. And so this is what we found. We found that among the 2,000 microRNAs we have studied, 20 of them were very much expressed, either very much downregulated or upregulated in women who later became affected with breast cancer in comparison with women who remain healthy. And the very interesting thing is to me, it's so fascinating. So many years before, in their blood, in the blood of women who later developed breast cancer, there were 3 clusters of microRNAs who were already indicating that part of the pathways to develop cancer were already activated 20 years before. And this was, for instance, steroid biosynthesis. Everybody in this room, I guess, knows that estrogens and androgens are important risk factors for breast cancer. And the ONT signaling pathway, other pathways in cancer, such as the TGF-beta signaling pathway, or the transcriptional misregulation in cancer, and the MAPK signaling pathway. So you can see that these guys here, the microRNAs, are able to tell us, oh, we are up or we are down-regulated in a very different way. So we are biomarkers. We are telling you that something is going on in this patient. On the other hand, they are able to tell us what is happening, which are the part of the machine that are activated in order to produce cancer. And then we went to the cells, and we induced the overexpression of particularly microRNAs among the 20 of these, the ones who are very much different. And we observed that, one microRNAs, they are characterized by number. 145-5P was associated with the ability to reduce metastatization. In other words, this microRNAs was very low in women who later developed breast cancer. And when we saw what was doing in the cells, we understood that this microRNAs was able to reduce the ability of cancer cells to metastasize. And another one, the 145-3P, was able to reduce proliferation. So this one was also down in women who got the higher probability to develop breast cancer, was very low. And this one, if upregulated, was able to make a break in cell proliferation. So both of them, even when we look at the cells in the lab, had a specific role in cancer development. So we had the biomarkers, right, to look for. And this was also similar results we observed in younger women. But the microRNAs were different. So we had the biomarkers of the initial stage. We want to find then an anti-cancer intervention, right? But you understand that we don't have much, right? When they tell you, we have to prevent cancer. So let's eat vegetable, fruit, physical activity, avoid exposure to sun, let's take vitamin D. But there are very vague information. So to find a way to have a stronger, we had very good biomarkers, we want to have a very good anti-cancer intervention. So here comes Mediterranean diet. I'm sorry, this slide has been always out of focus. I cannot fix it. So this is something that is a number of cancer cases for 100,000 population samples across the world in 2005. 2005 was an important step in the world because it was before the general globalization of nutrition that is affecting, I would say, our countries now. So what happened at the time? It was that, the highest incidence of breast cancer was still in North America. Then second rank was assigned to Australia and I would say North Europe. And then you see, South European countries were characterized by much lower incidence rate of cancer. Why? You have to think that between Italy and, let's say, France or Spain, there are a few thousand kilometers, right? So why it comes that? But the difference was strong, was really relevant. So they start to think about maybe it's the way in which these people eat. They started new studies. This is one of the done by Alian Slimani. She's a nutritional working at the International Agency for Cancer Research in Lyon. These are two samples of women, German women and Greek women. Here you can see there are different dietary items: vegetable, fruit, potatoes, margarine, butter, processed meat, and so on. And these are two different populations, in Potsdam and in Heidelberg in Germany. You can see that in the German women, this is the average consumption of each item in Europe. You can see that in German women, there is an incredible use of butter, right? In both populations, Potsdam and Heidelberg. Very high intake of processed meat, sausage, coffee, and coffee always goes in Germany with cakes and sweets. An incredible high level of juices, especially Apfelsaft. In Greece, actually, things are very different. Women had an incredible intake of legumes, incredible high intake of vegetable oils, in this case is olive oil, and intake of vegetable. But remember, legumes and vegetable oils. So you say, okay, now I understand. Greek people, women from Greece are eating a different way from the women in Germany. But the interesting fact is that German women have 4 times higher risk of breast cancer in comparison with Greek women. And this is incredible because, again, there are few kilometers separating these populations. And although from the genetic point of view, we are very, 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 very similar. We talk about Mediterranean diet. Why? Because in 1952, these were researchers who wanted to run an important study on cardiovascular disease, mortality. Because at the time, people was observing that in North America and in North European countries, there was a high incidence of cardiovascular disease and mortality for cardiovascular disease in comparison with countries and population in Southern Europe. So they started a new study. They want to compare what's going on. Why? At the time, they didn't think about diet. But Ansel Keys, one of the 4 guys that I showed you before, looking at different characteristics, physical activity, distribution of smoking, they had a very analytical approach to understand what was the difference. He realized that in Southern Europe, people had great bulk of the diet being bread, pasta, and local vegetable. Olive oil, sugar, and potatoes were eaten only in very small amounts, and butter was never used. Fruit and very small amount of goat, pecorino, cheese were quite regularly consumed. This was the first time that somebody was able to characterize the so-called Mediterranean diet. That is a concept quite common now. But at the time was like a huge discovery. So they evaluate this, and they explain the different incidence of coronary heart disease based on different diet. The question is true now? It's true even now that Mediterranean diet is protecting against chronic disease and cancer? So these are the definition of Mediterranean diet using these pyramids. I have to say that there is a huge representation in the diet now in olive oil, legumes, and vegetable. Pasta in the original formula was eaten once a week or twice a week during the weekend, and then fish and fruit. Fruit is important, but not as important as is depicted here. Fruit is a little bit up here. So fruit is important, but not as important as vegetable. And for sure, there are no sugars, butter, red meat, processed meat, and potatoes in the Mediterranean diet. So this has been a very new study done in 2013 in which they look at Mediterranean diet and overall mortality risk. So this guy, Francesco Safri of the Department of Experimental Medicine, University in Florence, he took all the studies done in different populations, in the population from Greece, Italy, in the Netherlands, in Spain. In these studies, what they did, they classify people within the different population, people who was following Mediterranean diet versus people who didn't follow Mediterranean diet, just because they were different in eating attitude. And they discover that in general, you see, here is the reduced risk of mortality and increased risk of mortality. In general, for big and small studies, there was a tendency toward protection. In other words, in all these studies, there was a very consistent evidence that the fraction of the population following a diet rich in vegetable, olive oil, fish, and with low intake of sugars and red meat were somehow protected against mortality, all kinds of mortality, cardiovascular, cancer mortality, coronary heart disease mortality. Very important. I have to underline that this is not as easy as you can imagine. For a factor to be protective on entire populations means that has to be very powerful. Diet is very powerful to produce the same effect on different populations, different culture, and different individuals. And then the question was, does it have the same effect on cancer, right? And you see here, Francesco Safri listed here all the studies in which they have evaluated Mediterranean diet in relation to cancer incidence or mortality risk. In other words, he included in the study all those studies in which population were separated in Mediterranean diet followers and followers of any other diet, and they look at the number of cases of cancer produced by these individuals and mortality for cancer in these individuals. And you can see again that there was a strong reduced risk of cancer in those who actually followed Mediterranean diet. There was only one study who were not negative. It was Couto. It's from Portugal. The other question was, so if you are a smoker, for instance, right, you have a high risk of lung cancer, bladder cancer, laryngeal cancer, a number of different cancers, not only lung. So if you eat Mediterranean diet and you are a smoker, are you saved? This study was conducted by Benetou, a group of Greek researchers, and they observed that actually Mediterranean diet was not totally able to work against the effect of important cancer-developing agents such as smoking. In other words, they observe that, being one, the number indicating the increased risk, there is a 30% protection against cancer in the non-smoking related cancer, while in the smoking related cancer, the effect was still there, but much smaller. These researchers, to evaluate the effect of Mediterranean diet on cancer onset, look at how people would have items in their diet during their life, the items from Mediterranean diet. For instance, in this group, people had, for instance, vegetable, olive oil, and goat cheese. In this other one, had the same 3 plus other 2. And this was the highest level score. So they were evaluating the score based on the items from Mediterranean diet, including their diet. So again, Mediterranean diet is a strong protecting factor against cancer, but it does not work properly in individuals exposed to smoking, for instance. Same thing for alcohol. Mediterranean diet includes a little bit of alcohol with meals. Half glasses, 1 glass of alcohol, of wine during meals. But when you introduce the alcohol for instance, in breast cancer, the protection disappears because alcohol is a very risky, important, strong factor for breast cancer in women. And then Trikopoulos, again, the group of researchers in Greece, wanted to see if the effect of Mediterranean diet was stronger in young women with breast cancer and then in women slightly older. And they observed that the effect is mainly in older women. Still in young women, there is a potential for this, for the protection effect. But in young women, the mutation that I mentioned to you in those cells, in order to create a cancer in young age, are usually very strong. And Mediterranean diet is not totally good in controlling it. It's like with smoking and with alcohol. Mediterranean diet is a very strong tool in our hands if we don't have major exposure to dangerous factors. Then it becomes weaker. And among the different items of a Mediterranean diet, able to decrease the level of risk is important part of legumes, and the other part is monounsaturated lipids, which is the major component of olive oil in Greece. But you remember, Greek women had a high intake of legumes and high intake of olive oil, and this confirmed the observation. And this is another study that has been conducted looking at Mediterranean diet and breast cancer, looking at protection, and this was another confirmation. This study is huge. It's over 10,000 breast cancer cases and 3 million controls. And then there's been an intervention trial in which women were treated with Mediterranean diet to see if actually Mediterranean diet is able to protect women against breast cancer. And in this case, the investigators divided the women in a Mediterranean diet plus extra virgin olive oil, Mediterranean diet plus nuts, walnuts and almonds, and control diet. This is the incidence of breast cancer. This is the 5 years time observation. You can see that the women on Mediterranean diet plus olive oil had a much lower level of breast cancer in comparison with the control diet and with Mediterranean diet plus nuts. So it's important. It seems very important to have Mediterranean diet plus olive oil. So this is what we do. Now we had an anti-cancer intervention, important intervention. We had biomarkers of initial phase. We can combine them, right? And so this is our hypothesis. Our hypothesis is that Mediterranean diet can induce the suppression of those microRNAs who are able to enhance the oncogenic activity. So we expect the microRNAs, due to Mediterranean diet, will help tumor suppressor activity and to repress breast cancer in this case. But this is the model. If this model works, then we can try on many other cancers. And also, we are allowed to understand why Mediterranean diet actually does this anti-cancer effect, because we do not know, right? And so we had the opportunity to use the samples from a large trial on 1,527 women on Mediterranean diet, on general information nutrition, and in a small group of women of both groups, we are going to measure microRNAs. The study will will take place in a lab, a new lab that we have developed. It was completed last week. You can see you have still plastic wrapping the instrument. And we will be able to detect microRNAs in the blood of women before and after the intervention of Mediterranean diet. This intervention has been very careful. We taught women how to cook, how to eat, and we had them coming over for lunch 3 times a week for 1 year. So why it's important? It's important because we want to see if in these women, if actually microRNAs will be changed. Among those microRNAs that change, there will be our microRNAs, the ones that they were moved 20 years, because if we can find it, we have now identified both biomarkers and the right anti-cancer intervention working together to decrease the breast cancer onset. And the second thing is to understand better the machine for cancer prevention, and so to simulate also what Mediterranean diet does in individual, because it's very difficult. If you look at here, you see at the beginning of the study, they had 1,476 people, women, following the diet. At the end, they had half of them, because people get tired. There are a lot of women in this room, and we are always on a hypocaloric diet. Now, every time we take care of our body, I don't know the boys' side of this room, but it's boring, it's difficult. So we need to find a way to help women to say, we can do Mediterranean diet for 5 months, and then you can go on these natural compounds, which actually does the same thing, right? We have to facilitate cancer prevention. Cancer prevention has to be a pleasure, not a nightmare. And the final thing is that Mediterranean diet is a very important tool in our hands. It comes from ancient time, and by the highest authority in the world. And God said, this is the Bible, give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seeds in it. They will be yours for food. It didn't mention sugar, meat, and butter. And these are colleagues of mine. Thank you so much.